Blackout, Book 3, The Stalker. Written by Ion Esimai, published by Suburban Press, an eReads production. Chapter 1. My digital watch rolled over to exactly 8:00 p.m. when the grid died. 1 second, the street hummed with it. Air conditioners, porch lights, the blue flicker of televisions behind drawn curtains, the low electrical pulse of a neighborhood that ran on money and comfort, the absolute certainty that the lights would always come back on. Then nothing. The pop had been massive, metallic, a sound like a transformer eating itself somewhere out on Route 9. One hard crack and then silence so total it had physical weight. High-vis vest, tactical maglite, notebook in the left cargo pocket, pen clipped to the right. I had been finishing my 7:45 patrol sweep when the grid went, standing at the end of my driveway, perfectly positioned. As if I'd known. I hadn't known the power would fail. But the street was already fracturing. 10 minutes before the lights went out, Evelyn Marsh stepped onto her dark porch, tapped out a message on a cheap plastic cell phone, definitely not from the Apple store, and slipped back inside to her dinner party. 5 minutes after that, Linda Patterson marched out of her front door and straight across the asphalt toward Mark and Aaron's house, looking like a woman on her way to an execution. I hadn't known the grid was about to blow, but I was ready for it, and that was the difference between everyone else on this street and me. They reacted. I was already in position. The maglite came up. The beam hit number 4 first. The Kellermans. Through the front window, 2 shapes lurched room to room, phones out. Flashlight apps cast weak blue-white shadows. Gerald Kellerman walked into what was probably a side table. The shape staggered, grabbed the wall. I watched. The beam moved to number 12, the Millers. Through the kitchen window, Brian Miller was already yanking open his stainless steel freezer, panic-loading expensive cuts of meat into a cooler, while his wife Diane frantically dialed a cell phone that had no signal. Typical. The predictable, frantic energy of people who had never once prepared for anything. A faint metallic click sounded from the dark above them, like an aluminum window screen popping loose. I didn't bother panning the flashlight up to the second floor. It was probably just the wind or a raccoon on the roofline. I kept the beam locked on the kitchen, savoring the helpless panic in Brian's face. I thought I was the only one in control tonight. I was wrong. The beam moved to number 6, the Parkers. A door cracked open, no lights behind it, just dark. The Parker woman. Robe, no shoes, phone held up like a lantern. "That you, Arthur?" The beam didn't stop moving. "Go inside, Carol." The door clicked shut. This was the thing about a blackout. The thing none of them understood yet. The things everyone was doing right now. Fumbling for candles. Calling the power company on phones that would be dead in 3 hours. A blackout was an equalizer. Every security system on this street ran on grid power. Every camera. Every floodlight. Every alarm panel with its false sense of security and authority. All of it dark now. All of it useless. These people had spent enormous sums of money making themselves feel safe. The money was with the security companies. The safety was gone. The beam swept across number 8, Mark's house, the physician. Second floor office window glowed faint with the pale light of a laptop screen. He was up there then. Probably panicking about his battery percentage, probably calling Aaron's name into the hallway. Aaron wasn't answering. I didn't know that specifically. I knew the architecture of their arguments. You watched a marriage long enough, you learned its patterns. The way she went downstairs when he went up. The way she sought out other company. Greg Patterson, usually. Yes, I said it. Golden Retriever Greg. Always ready with a sympathetic smile and a shared beer over the property line. I had watched that particular friendship drift across the boundary of neighborly goodwill months ago. Mark was too arrogant to see it, and Linda was too proud to admit it. But I saw everything. The beam moved. Number 10, Greg Patterson's house. Dark. Completely dark. No movement at the windows. No shapes crossing room to room with their phones held up. Still, I kept the beam there longer than the others. Greg was always the last to react. Controlled man. Methodical. The kind who wouldn't fumble for candles or crowd the window. He would sit very still in whatever room he was already in and wait for the situation to define itself before he moved. I respected that, in the abstract. The beam dropped. I turned. The cul-de-sac was mine. That was the only way to describe it. The street I'd walked at least once a day for 11 years, cataloged every deviation, every unfamiliar car, every light left on past midnight. The street where no one returned a wave with both hands, where they smiled the thin smiles of people tolerating a minor inconvenience, where they called me by my first name in the tone they used for service workers. All of it dark now, all of them helpless. And I was the only one standing in the center of it with a working light and a functioning plan. Plus 11 years of institutional knowledge about every house, every resident, every habit, every weakness on this block. The heat pressed down. 94 degrees at 8 p.m. and not a breath of air anywhere. The humidity turned the night soupy. My vest clung. Sweat tracked down my spine. I didn't care. The discomfort was fuel. The heat meant they were already suffering inside their sealed, powerless houses, already reaching for their phones, already feeling the first edge of something they hadn't felt in years. Vulnerability. I turned the beam down the street. The cul-de-sac curved left at its far end, pulled the last two houses out of the direct sightline from the center. Number 10 behind me, the curve ahead, and at the very end, set back from the road, the dark shape of the last house on the block. Number 12. Valerie's house, out of town, had been for 3 days. I knew her schedule, not because she told me, because I paid attention. The absence of her car, the mail stacking, the particular stillness of an empty house that looked different from a house where people were simply sleeping. Number 12 was empty. The beam hit the front face of it, white siding gone gray in the mag light's wash. Dark windows, no movement. The front walk perfectly maintained, because Valerie maintained everything, even in absentia. My feet had already started moving. I walked the curve of the cul-de-sac at a slow pace. Past number 10. Past the narrow gap between properties where the dew-wet grass smelled thick and green in the heat. The beam stayed fixed on number 12. I reached the end of the street and I stopped at the foot of the front walk. The house sat silent above me. Empty. I looked at the door. Chapter 2. I stood at the stone wall and killed the mag light. Darkness slammed in from every direction. I didn't move. I let my eyes adjust. Let the night settle around me until the shapes came back. The line of arborvitae along Valerie's property, the iron gate at the side, the faint outline of the stone path leading back toward the house. No lights in any window. No movement. Nothing. She was gone. I knew that for a fact. Tuesday morning, I'd watched her load a single hard-shell carry-on into the back of her Audi. Compact bag, efficient packer. She'd been on the phone the whole time. Something about a conference, 2 nights, maybe 3. She hadn't noticed me at the mailboxes. People rarely did. That was the thing about this neighborhood. These people spent their entire lives performing for each other. The perfect lawn, the perfect car, the charity auction donation, the casual mention of the Hamptons house. But the moment they stepped outside without an audience, they went completely blind. Valerie had not looked at her own street in years. 4 days since Tuesday. The house had been sitting empty and dark since the grid blew. I was simply performing due diligence. I unlatched the iron gate and stepped through into the backyard. The temperature dropped a degree. Just 1, under the arborvitae's canopy. The grass was damp against my shoes. The smell hit me immediately. Roses along the back fence. Something green and overwatered in the planter beds. The rich, dark scent of mulch still holding the day's heat. I stopped breathing through my mouth. Sound traveled differently back here. No street noise, no distant hum of traffic from the main road. The cicadas were louder. My own heartbeat was louder. I noticed it the way you notice a soundtrack, present, insistent, then almost pleasant. This wasn't fear. Fear was what Brian Miller felt right now, on his knees in front of a melting refrigerator, helpless and sweating. Fear was what happened to people who hadn't prepared, who hadn't thought ahead, who hadn't spent years quietly learning the rhythms and routines and vulnerabilities of the people around them. This was something else. This was the pure, clean thrill of being invisible. I crossed the yard from memory, 14 steps from the gate to the edge of the patio. I'd counted them before, on the welfare check back in March. The stone path rose slightly underfoot. Now, I slowed, heel to toe, each step placed with precision. No sound. The wrought iron patio furniture sat somewhere to my left. I didn't reach for it, didn't need it. My hands knew where they were going. The ceramic frog sat at the base of the large stone planter on the right side of the patio door. I crouched down. My fingers swept the base of the planter, gritty stone, damp soil, the rough ceramic curve of the frog's back. I tilted it forward. The small brass key skated across the stone. I caught it clean before it could ring against the surface. I straightened up, held the key between two fingers. Back in March, I'd told myself I'd return it, drop it in her mailbox with a note about the security vulnerability. Something professional, something documented. I never got around to it. The back patio door was 3 steps ahead. Older sliding glass frame, single-cylinder deadbolt on the interior handle, a good lock, if you were the kind of person who remembered to use it consistently. Valerie was not always that kind of person. I had observed this. I stepped to the door, raised the key, slid the metal into the lock. One turn, clean and smooth. The deadbolt clicked open. Chapter 3. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. One smooth motion, slide, turn, click. The darkness inside was total. Not the soft dark of the backyard where the moon still bled through the tree line and gave the world some shape. This was sealed dark. It pressed against your eyeballs and your brain started inventing shapes that weren't there. The air hit me next. Dead, stiflingly hot. The house had spent all day fighting the heat with the AC running. The moment the grid died, it stopped fighting and started hoarding. Every breath tasted stale, recycled and thick, like the inside of a car left in full sun. I didn't move. Old habit. You stand still first. You let the house speak before you walk into it. I'd read that in a property security manual years ago. It had never once steered me wrong. I stood still. The house said nothing. I reached into my vest pocket and pulled out the pen light. Narrow barrel. Tight, focused beam. Nothing that would bleed through a curtain or throw shadows across a window frame visible from the street. I'd ordered it online, specifically for situations like this. Low profile, tactical, professional. I clicked it on. The pale column swept the mudroom floor. Tile, slightly worn near the door. A pair of running shoes lined up with military neatness beside the mat. A coat rack. A single linen jacket hung off center, one sleeve trailing. A canvas tote from some gym I didn't recognize propped against the baseboard. I cataloged it all. That was the discipline. You didn't walk through a space, you read it. Every object was information. Every detail was data. Years of neighborhood watch had trained my eye to process a room the way a doctor read a chart. Fast, clinical, complete. Suck on that, Dr. Mark Evans. I moved into the kitchen. The beam slid across the countertops, clean, uncluttered. Not a dish in the sink, not a glass left out. The kind of clean that took effort, the kind that didn't happen by accident. Valerie was a deliberate woman, controlled. She didn't leave things out where they could be seen. A bowl of fruit on the island. A banana gone soft and dark at the edges, splitting at the tip. The smell of it reached me, sweet and overripe, faintly fermented in the dead air. She'd been gone long enough for the fruit to turn. I barely registered it. I was already thinking about the office. Valerie had lived at number 12 for 6 years. In 6 years, I'd learned almost nothing about her. Reserved. Private. The kind of neighbor who waved from the driveway and went back inside before you could cross the street. I'd tried, on multiple occasions, to build the kind of rapport good neighborhood relations required. A comment about her landscaping. An offer to forward the watch's monthly safety newsletter. A gentle inquiry after her husband left 3 years ago. Quietly. No for sale sign. A truck in the driveway one afternoon. Then one fewer car. Whether she was managing all right on her own. Every time she'd smiled and gone inside. Polite, firm, closed. I'd wondered about Valerie for 3 years. Tonight, I didn't have to wonder. The hallway stretched ahead of me. I kept the pen light angled low, beam at the floor so the light wouldn't travel toward the front windows. Hardwood. Uneven near the baseboard, a soft creak waiting for anyone who didn't know it was there. I knew it was there. I stepped over it without breaking stride. A narrow side table against the wall. Ceramic bowl for keys. Empty, which meant she'd taken them with her. A framed photograph above it. I paused for half a second, tilting the beam up. A boy. Teenage. Dark-haired. Grinning at the camera with the easy confidence of someone who hadn't learned yet that the world would push back. Valerie's son. I remembered him. He hadn't set foot on this street since the husband packed his truck 3 years ago. He lived with his father now. I knew that because I made a point of reading the return addresses on the birthday cards Valerie mailed out every October, the ones that never seemed to yield a visit. I moved on. The office was the second door on the left. I knew the layout of every house on Oak Ridge Court, not from breaking in, from paying attention, from watching which lights went on in which rooms, from noting where shadows moved when people passed their windows at night, from observing what everyone else was too self-important to notice. That was the thing about this neighborhood. These people had every advantage. The money, the square footage, the alarm systems, the cameras. Yet they were still the least observant people I had ever met. They looked at each other all day long and saw nothing. I saw everything. I pushed the office door open. The room smelled different from the rest of the house. Drier. A faint trace of something floral. A reed diffuser on the windowsill, dark and nearly dry. The beam swept the room in one slow arc. Bookshelf along the far wall. A small love seat. A printer on a stand in the corner. Paper tray empty. Then the desk. Dark wood. Wide surface, deliberately blank. A closed laptop pushed to one side. A ceramic dish with a single pen. A charging cable coiled into a perfect loop beside it. The desk of a woman who kept everything put away. My pulse ticked up. Not fast, not spiking. Just a steady, quiet elevation. The particular feeling of standing at the edge of something. I'd felt it before, over the years. The moment right before a space gave up what it was hiding. I crossed to the desk, stood behind the chair, ran the pen light slowly across the surface one more time. Then I reached down, wrapped my fingers around the handle of the first drawer, and pulled it open. Chapter 4. The drawer was full. I pulled it out to its full extension and angled the pen light down. Envelopes. A stack of them, banded together with a rubber band gone brittle at the edges. Loose papers beneath, folded, creased, the kind of documents you handled often enough that the folds had turned soft. A small spiral notebook with a pen clipped to the cover. I lifted the banded stack out and set it on the desk. Private mail. The rubber band snapped when I worked it off, dry and spent. I set the two halves aside and spread the envelopes across the dark wood surface, fanning them under the beam. Credit card statements, a car insurance renewal, a letter from a law firm, the return address printed in small, conservative font in the upper left corner. I set that one aside and kept moving. Bank statements, 3 months' worth, folded into thirds. I opened the first one. The numbers came into focus under the pen light and I read them the way I read everything, fast, thorough, without sentiment. Checking account, moderate balance, regular withdrawals on the 1st and 15th. Mortgage payment, auto pay. Utility bills, auto pay, a weekly grocery charge at the same store, consistent to within $20 every time. Disciplined, methodical. I turned to the second statement. The savings account balance stopped me. I read it twice. Then I set the paper down and looked at the wall for a moment. All of it. Just sitting there. In a savings account earning almost nothing, parked and untouched for, I checked the transaction history, 14 months. Not a single withdrawal. Not a single addition either, which meant it had come from somewhere else. A settlement maybe. An inheritance. I thought about the truck in her driveway 3 years ago. The husband who left without a for sale sign or a forwarding address. The law firm envelope in the stack. Divorce settlement. That was my read. A clean, quiet exit with a significant number attached. Valerie had more money than anyone on this street knew about, and she'd spent 3 years letting them all assume she was struggling. The grin came back. That was the thing about people. They performed poverty the same way they performed wealth, loudly for an audience. Valerie had simply opted out of the performance entirely. She'd let them all look past her. Let them assume. I knew better now. I refolded the statements, replaced them in the drawer in the same order I'd found them, edges aligned. The rubber band was useless, so I looped it loosely around the stack and set it back where it had been. No trace. That was the discipline. The house settled around me with a low wooden groan, the kind old houses made when the temperature shifted, the frame expanding and contracting with the heat. I froze. Listened. The groan faded. Silence came back. I let out a slow breath through my nose. The stagnant air pressed in on all sides. My own breathing sounded too loud in it, deliberate and heavy, each inhale magnified by the dead quiet of the sealed house. I became aware of it the way you became aware of a clock ticking. Once you noticed it, you couldn't stop. I closed the drawer. Opened the second one. More paper, a checkbook, a small velvet pouch that clinked softly when I moved it. Coins or jewelry, I didn't open it. A folder of what looked like medical documents, the top sheet printed with a hospital letterhead I didn't take time to read. I noted it, filed it. The third drawer held nothing useful. Pens, a box of paper clips, a small flat flashlight with dead batteries. I pushed it shut. The office had given me what it had. I straightened up and swept the pen light in a slow arc across the room one final time. Bookshelf, love seat, printer stand, desk. Everything back where it belonged. Everything exactly as I'd found it. Almost exactly. I moved to the door and stepped back into the hallway. The dark pressed in again. I kept the pen light low. The hardwood was silent under my feet. I knew where to step now, where the boards were tight and where they shifted. The hallway felt longer on the way out than it had on the way in. I reached the foot of the stairs. Carpeted, dark runner, edges bound in some kind of tape that had started to fray near the bottom step. My hand found the banister. Smooth wood, slightly dusty. I stood there for a moment. I told myself I was listening, checking, being thorough. The upstairs was dark and quiet and empty. I told myself that too. I took the first step and climbed. The carpet absorbed my weight without a sound. I counted the steps without meaning to. 8, 9, 10. The landing opened up ahead of me, a dark T-junction, 2 doors on the left and 1 on the right. The one on the right was ajar. I crossed to it, pushed it open. The master bedroom. Chapter 5. The master bedroom was exactly what I expected. Neat, controlled. The same deliberate blankness as the office downstairs carried up here and applied to every surface. Bed made tight, pillows aligned. A single nightstand on the left side. 1 glass, 1 book, 1 lamp. Nothing on the right side at all. She slept alone and had stopped pretending otherwise. I swept the pen light slowly across the room. Dresser against the far wall, mirror above it dark and reflective, throwing my own narrow beam back at me. A small upholstered chair in the corner with a folded blanket draped over the arm. A framed print above the headboard I didn't bother to read. I crossed to the closet. Louvered doors, floor to ceiling, the kind with the angled slats that let air move through. I hooked my fingers into the center gap and pulled them open. The smell hit me first. Subtle, dry. The particular scent of fabric and cedar and something underneath it. Perfume or body lotion, absorbed into the hanging clothes over months and years until it became part of the fiber itself. I stood in the doorway for a moment and inhaled. The pen light swept the interior. Clothes hung in 2 neat rows, the longer items on the left folded over hangers with care, the shorter items on the right. Blouses, a few blazers, 2 dresses in dry cleaning bags, the plastic still crisp, shoes on the floor in pairs, toes pointing out. I reached in with my free hand. The silk was cool against my palm. I ran my fingers along the hanging row, felt the fabric shift and whisper against itself as I moved through it. Smooth, expensive, probably cost more than I made in a week and got worn to events I'd never be invited to. I thought about Valerie wearing these things, moving through rooms full of people who looked past her the same way they looked past me, except she'd chosen it. She'd bought her invisibility with that settlement money and worn it like a second skin. We weren't so different, the two of us. I pushed that thought away and moved to the built-in dresser on the right side of the closet. 4 drawers. I started at the top. Folded items. Thin fabric, carefully arranged in rows. I ran the pen light along them and identified them without touching. The workout clothes with moisture-wicking panels and flat seams. Practical. Functional. Not what I was looking for. I slid that drawer shut. The second one. I already knew what I'd find before the drawer was fully open. The particular weight of it, the slight give in the runners, the way it moved. I'd opened enough of them over the years, in enough houses, during enough welfare checks and vacancy inspections to know by feel. I aimed the pen light down. The beam swept the contents. I killed it immediately. My heartbeat pounded in my chest. I didn't need the light for this part. I set the pen light on top of the dresser, freeing both hands. The dark was total and complete around me. That was exactly right. That was how this worked. You didn't look. Looking made it something else. Something harder to justify, even to yourself. In the dark, it was just sensation. Just fabric. Just the particular private softness of something that belonged to someone who didn't know I was here. I lifted a handful of the fabric from the drawer. Silk again, lighter than the blouses. Warmer from sitting in the clothes drawer in the baking heat of the sealed house. I brought it up slowly in both hands. Pressed it to my face. The smell was immediate. Overwhelming. Not perfume, exactly. Something more personal than that. Something that lived in fabric the way memory lived in a room. Absorbed and permanent. Impossible to wash all the way out. I stood there in the pitch-black closet with my eyes closed, the heat pressed against me from all sides. My own breathing filled the small space, a wheeze like an asthmatic patient. Nothing existed outside these 4 walls, outside this particular dark, outside this exact moment that no one would ever know about, because no one ever looked toward the end of the road. No one ever looked at me at all. I don't know how long I stood there, long enough that the heat stopped feeling oppressive and began to feel like something else. Long enough that the house around me faded to nothing. No street outside, no neighbors, no blackout, no patrol. Just this. Satisfied, I replaced the fabric, closed the drawer, and moved to the window. The spotting scope was where it always was, mounted on its tripod in the corner of the window, angled toward the street. I couldn't resist. I leaned over it, adjusted the focus wheel, and let the glass pull the dark neighborhood close. I swept past Greg's driveway, past Mark's dark house, and then I saw movement near the hedgerow. A figure stumbled through the wet grass, panicked, erratic. I tracked it as the magnification caught a figure stepping into a patch of pale moonlight. Someone. Shirt stained black in the low light, hands coated in it. Blood. My pulse spiked. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The lock screen flared to life against my palm. The white numbers read 8:12 p.m. I swiped to the camera, pressed the lens against the scope's eyepiece, and tapped the shutter. A perfect magnified photograph of whoever this was, covered in blood. I placed the phone on the windowsill, returned my eye to the scope. The figure disappeared out of sight. I stood still and tried to process what I'd seen. Minutes passed. What was going on? Then the thud hit. My heart jumped. It was distinct and heavy from directly below me. The first floor. Chapter 6. My body went rigid. Every nerve ending fired at once. I glanced down at the faint green glow of my watch face in the dark. 8:15 p.m. I returned to the closet, retrieved the pen light from the dresser, and clicked it off. The dark in the master bedroom felt different now. Active. It pressed against my eyes until my pupils ached with the effort of finding something to land on. I backed up against the wall and didn't breathe. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. I counted to 5. Nothing moved below me. No second thud, no footsteps, no voices. Just the dense, stagnant air of a sealed house and the blood hammering in my own ears. I counted to 10. Still nothing. My lungs started to burn. I let the breath out through my nose in a thin, controlled stream and pulled another one in just as slowly. Thought. The thud had come from below. Center of the house, not the kitchen, not the front foyer. Somewhere in the middle. The hallway maybe, or one of the rooms off it. A single impact, heavy and flat, the kind of sound that traveled through floor joists and arrived upstairs stripped of its source, but not its weight. I was not alone in this house. The realization didn't arrive slowly. It landed all at once, fully formed and irreversible. A looter? No. The conclusion arrived with a cold, clinical clarity. I'd just watched a figure stumble into the shadows, looking hunted. They hadn't just run to the end of the cul-de-sac. They'd run here, to the empty house at the end of the street. Came through the front door. Maybe there was a key for them under a rock too. My chest went cold, but the adrenaline underneath it was a massive, intoxicating spike. The neighborhood watch captain had just witnessed something out of the ordinary. I reached down in the dark and closed my hand around the barrel of the tactical maglite. Heavy, solid, aircraft-grade aluminum, 32 ounces, the same model carried by law enforcement officers in 11 states. I knew that because I researched it before purchasing. I'd also researched grip technique, strike zones, and the legal parameters of civilian use of force in this state. I had never once had a situation that required any of it. More than a decade of patrols, newsletters, incident logs, laminated ID cards, and showing up when no one called me, leaving before anyone noticed I'd been there. Not one situation. I thought about that for half a second, then I tightened my grip. The bedroom came back in shades of dark gray as my eyes adjusted. The tight bed, the dresser with its black mirror, the pale rectangle of the doorway opening into the hall. I moved toward it with the maglite raised to shoulder height, thumb resting on the switch. I stopped at the bedroom door. Listened. The house pressed in around me. Heat from the ceiling, heat from the floor. The trapped warmth of a space that had been sealed all day with no way to breathe. Sweat gathered at my collar. A single bead ran the length of my spine. I strained into the silence. The landing stretched ahead of me, dark and still. The staircase dropped away to the left. Somewhere below, the first floor waited. The hallway, the office, the kitchen, the rooms I'd already moved through once tonight. Come on, give me something. The silence held for 3 full seconds. Then it broke. From directly below me, muffled by the floor and the walls and the column of dead air between, came the unmistakable sound of water running. The downstairs half bathroom. Someone had turned on the tap. Chapter 7. The water was still running. I moved to the top of the stairs and listened to it. The faint, steady hiss of a tap left open, traveled up through the walls of the house, and reached me like a signal. Someone was down there. Not settling floorboards, not thermal expansion. A person was in the downstairs half bathroom with the water running. Who? I tightened my grip on the maglite and did not turn it on. Light was information. The moment I clicked that beam on, I gave up my position, my advantage, everything. Whoever was there would see the glow from the hallway and know exactly where I was, and exactly how far away. I wasn't going to hand them that. I kept the maglite dark and stood at the top of the stairs contemplating my next move. The staircase dropped away in front of me, a pale gray slope in the near total dark. 10 steps, carpeted runner down the center, wooden edges on both sides. I'd come up these stairs 20 minutes ago without a sound. I knew which side held and which side gave. I stepped onto the first stair, right side, close to the wall. My weight settled. The carpet absorbed it cleanly. No sound. I moved to the second. Same placement, same result. Slow, deliberate. Each foot placed with the full concentration of a man who understood that sound was the only currency that mattered right now. Third step, fourth. The water kept running below me, steady and indifferent, masking whatever small noises I made. Good. I used it. Let it cover me. Moved a half step faster with it than I would have without it. Fifth step. Sixth. Halfway. My right foot found the 7th step, and I transferred my weight. The board screamed. A sharp, percussive crack split the silence of the house like a hammer through drywall. I froze with my full weight on the step, both hands locked around the maglite, every muscle in my body turned to concrete. 1 second. 2. The water stopped. Not gradually, not the slow pressure drop of someone releasing a tap. It cut off instantly, mid-flow, like a switch thrown. One moment the hiss was there. The next, it wasn't. What replaced it was a completely different kind of silence than the one before. Occupied silence. Listening silence. It meant the person downstairs heard exactly what I heard and was now doing exactly what I was doing. Stood perfectly still in the dark and tried to figure out what came next. My chest went cold. Whoever was there now knew I was here. My advantage was gone. I stood on the 7th step and ran the calculation fast. They were in the bathroom, off the main hallway. A single entry point, no window large enough to matter. The hallway ran from the foot of the stairs to the back of the house. If they came out of the bathroom, they had 2 options, toward me or away. Neither one was good for me standing frozen on a staircase with no cover and no light. I forced my right foot up, 8th step, quiet this time. I shifted my weight to the far left edge, away from the protesting board. The carpet held. 9th step. 10th. The foot of the stairs opened onto the main hallway, and I stepped off the last riser onto the hardwood floor. The transition was barely audible, a breath of sound, nothing more. I pressed my back against the wall to my left and held the mag light up at shoulder height, thumb on the rubberized switch. The hallway stretched ahead of me, black, dense, darkness that made distances unreliable, turned 10 feet into 20 and made walls feel closer than they were. The half bathroom was at the far end. A faint outline of its door meant it was slightly ajar. No movement. No sound. Nothing. I steadied my breathing. In through the nose, out through the nose, slow and controlled. I was in control. This was my situation. I had the weapon, I had the training, over 10 years of preparation for exactly this kind of moment. The looter or whoever was in that bathroom had none of those things. Was that someone from the neighborhood? I had my doubts. I told myself that. I almost believed it. Then the shadow moved. At the far end of the hallway, in the gap of the bathroom doorway, a shape detached itself from the dark and stepped forward. Chapter 8. I didn't think. That was the truth of it, stripped of everything else. All the manuals, all the research, all the 30 years of preparation I'd carried around like a second skin evaporated in the half second between seeing the shadow move and my arm swinging. Pure reflex, pure animal. As Mike Tyson said before his fight with Tyrell Biggs in 1987, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. I stepped forward and swung the mag light hard at head height. The aluminum cut through the dead air with a low whistle and connected with nothing. The shadow wasn't there anymore. I didn't understand it. I had seen the figure step forward, had tracked it, had aimed for the center mass of it in the dark, and then it simply wasn't where I'd calculated it to be. Too fast, too fluid, moving in a way that didn't match my model of a stumbling opportunist caught off guard in the dark. I had half a second to register that before the hallway exploded. Something hit my left shoulder, not a punch, a shove. The flat-palmed driving force of someone putting their whole body behind it. I spun sideways into the wall. My elbow cracked against the drywall. The mag light stayed in my grip by reflex alone. I got my feet back under me and lunged forward with my free arm extended. I tried to find purchase, tried to grab something. My fingers caught fabric. I yanked. The figure yanked back harder. We collided in the center of the hallway, a tight, graceless tangle of bodies in the complete dark. Elbows, grabbing hands, the hot, ragged breathing of 2 people running on adrenaline. I was bigger. I knew that. 40 pounds at least, and I tried to use it, drove forward, tried to pin them against the opposite wall. They didn't let me. A hand found my vest, the left lapel, 2 fists closing around the nylon, and before I could brace, the weight behind it shifted and I was moving. Not stumbling. Flying. My heels left the floor for one stomach-dropping instant. Then my back hit the drywall. The impact drove every cubic inch of air from my lungs in a single catastrophic instant. I heard myself make a sound I had never made before. Not a grunt, not a shout. Something smaller and more humiliating than either. I tried to get up. One knee down, one hand splayed against the hardwood, the mag light somewhere beside me. I couldn't breathe. That was my only reality for 3 full seconds. Not the pain in my back, not the ringing in my elbow, not the figure somewhere in the dark above me. The total drowning absence of air in my lungs and the specific nauseating panic of a body that had forgotten how to fix it. I pressed my palm flat against the floor and pushed. Got 1 foot under me. My diaphragm unlocked with a convulsive gasp that tasted like dust and hot air and something sharper underneath. I sucked in a full breath. It sounded like moments ago when I had Valerie's fabric over my face. I kicked that thought to the curb. My vision went briefly gray at the edges and then steadied. I was on my knees in the hallway of a house I had broken into. I had just been thrown against a wall by a person I couldn't see. The cold fact of it cut straight through the adrenaline. This was not a random opportunist, not a stumbling amateur working fast in the dark. This person knew their way around the house, like they had been inside it long enough to map its dimensions by feel, or at least been here before, to know the width of the hallway and the give of the floor and exactly how much space they had to work with. My hand found the mag light. I didn't think about it. My fingers closed around the barrel, brought it up and jammed my thumb down on the switch. The beam detonated in the dark. Blinding. Absolute. A wall of white light swallowed the hallway whole and hit whatever was in front of me like a physical force. I aimed it directly at my attacker. Chapter 9. The beam hit her full in the face. She flinched. Both hands came up instinctively. She turned away from the light, and I had half a second of pure, disorienting confusion before my brain caught up with what my eyes were already telling it. I knew her. That was the first thought. Not who she was. The raw, unprocessed fact of recognition. The jawline. The hair. The way she held her shoulders, which I had cataloged without meaning to over the years. Block parties, driveway conversations. The kind of proximity that came from living 40 feet apart for a decade. And then the second thought arrived and rearranged everything. The person I saw through the scope less than half an hour ago. Her shirt stained black in the low light, her hands coated in blood. Erin Evans, Mark's wife. I stared at her. She stared back into the beam, squinted against the light, one arm still raised against the glare. Her chest heaved. Her hair was loose, pieces of it stuck to the side of her face, damp with sweat. Her blouse was misbuttoned, 2 full holes off. The fabric pulled wrong across her collarbone, the left side riding higher than the right. Her feet were bare, no shoes, no socks. The soles dark with grime. I processed that. Then I processed her hands. She lowered her arms slowly as her eyes adjusted to the beam. I kept the light on her face and let it drop by degrees, tracking down. Her forearms first, bare, pale in the harsh LED light. Then her hands. My stomach turned. The skin was wrong. Not dirty. Not bruised. Wrong in a way that took my brain a full second to classify because it was trying to fit what it saw into a category that made sense. The only category available was the one I didn't want to use. Pink. A diluted, sickly, uneven pink. The color of something dark that had been scrubbed at without coming fully clean. The color of water running red and then running pale and then running clear. But leaving a trace behind in the creases of the knuckles, in the lines of the palms, in the skin beneath the fingernails where no amount of soap reached. She had been washing blood off her hands. For how long? The tap had been running when I heard it. It had cut off the moment my foot hit that board on the stairs, which meant she had been standing at that sink in the dark, in a house she had no business being in, scrubbing at her hands in the pitch black long enough that the water had run warm and gone cold again. The patrol felt very far away. The laminated ID card in my breast pocket felt very far away. Every newsletter I'd written, every incident report, every late-night loop around the cul-de-sac, they felt like they belonged to someone else. A different life. A neighborhood that no longer existed. I was crouching on the floor of Valerie's hallway. I had broken in with a stolen key, and the woman standing 6 feet in front of me had blood on her hands that she could not entirely wash off. Erin's eyes found mine above the beam. She stopped squinting. Her breathing slowed, not calm. Controlled. There was a difference. She wasn't coming down from the adrenaline. She was managing it, redirecting it. The way you do when you need to think clearly and your body is trying to stop you. I recognized the discipline because I had tried to use it myself 20 minutes ago on a staircase, telling myself I was prepared, telling myself I was in control. I'd been wrong. I kept the beam on her and began to lower it. Her torso, her waist, her hands again. Those ruined, half-clean hands hanging at her sides. And then lower. Her right hand wasn't empty. I followed the line of her fingers down to what they held, and the last functioning piece of my self-mythology quietly came apart. She wasn't cowering. She was gripping a bloody steel hammer. Chapter 10. I told my legs to move. They didn't. I was still half-crouched, the mag light held up in front of me like a torch or a weapon or some desperate combination of both. The beam stayed locked on her face. Keep the light on the threat. That was the logic, and I held on to it because it was the only piece of logic I had left. Erin didn't lunge. She stood exactly where she was, 6 feet away, the bloody hammer at her side, her chest heaving. My brain kept trying to load the correct response and kept failing. I had a template for looters. I had a template for teenagers trespassing. I had a template for almost every scenario I had imagined over 30 years of preparation. I did not have a template for Mark's wife standing in Valerie's hallway with blood drying in the creases of her knuckles. The laminated ID card in my breast pocket felt like a joke. Every assumption I had carried with me onto this street tonight collapsed completely. I didn't know anything. I had never known anything. My hand was trembling. The beam shook. I waited for her to run. When she didn't run, I waited for whatever came next. Erin's eyes moved. Up from the beam. Past it. To my face. She looked at me. Really looked. The way you look when you finally see something instead of just registering its presence. Something in her expression shifted. She recognized me. Her face changed in stages. The fear went out of her eyes, replaced by something I had no clean word for. The particular quality of a mind that had just solved a problem it hadn't known how to solve 30 seconds ago. She'd recognized me, and the recognition had not frightened her. The math arrived uninvited. I was in this house illegally. I had entered with a stolen key. If she walked out of this house and told a single person she had found Arthur Pruitt inside Valerie's home in the dark, everything I had built over 30 years evaporated. Gone. She knew that. I could see her knowing it in the way her eyes steadied. Her breathing slowed. She wasn't calculating whether to attack me. She was calculating what I was worth to her. What a neighborhood watch captain with no alibi and no explanation could do for her. The answer, apparently, was quite a lot. I stood in the dark hallway and looked at the woman who had just quietly, completely, without making a single threat, taken everything I had ever held over this neighborhood and turned it into a leash. Erin stepped forward. The gap between us closed to 3 feet. The hammer hung loose at her side. She tilted her face slightly away from the beam. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Arthur, thank God. You have to help me hide. Chapter 11. Erin squinted, shifted her head side to side. Please, you have to help me hide. Her voice shook. I lowered the flashlight. Not all the way, just enough. She collapsed against the wall. Her knees buckled first, then her back hit the plaster and she slid down slow, landing hard on the floor. Her whole body shook. Not a performance, real tremors, the kind the body produces on its own without permission. I let her shake. I watched. Then I asked what happened. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She tried again. The words arrived in pieces, wet and broken, the way words do when the mind is still catching up to the body. I stopped listening. Not to be cruel, to observe. The flashlight swept her once. Casual. Clinical. The blouse still misbuttoned, the soles of her feet dark with grime from the basement floor. She threw her clothes on in the dark. She threw them on fast. I knew exactly why. The knowledge didn't arrive as a surprise. I had known about her and Greg for 4 months. The lingering looks at block parties, the way his car sat just a fraction too close to her property line on Tuesday afternoons when Mark was at the clinic. I saw everything. The misbuttoned blouse simply confirmed what they were doing tonight before the lights went out. I kept my face empty. She was still talking. The story arrived in fragments. Basement. Greg. She said they were talking. Just talking. She used that word twice. I counted. Then Linda. Linda on the stairs, holding a cell phone, already screaming. Accusations, names, specifics. Linda came down holding a cell phone. That detail snagged. I held it, turned it over. A phone. Active. Something she read that sent her down those stairs. I pulled the earlier hour back into focus, before the blackout. My own living room window. The spotting scope not yet deployed. Just my eyes and the ambient light of Evelyn's dinner party across the cul-de-sac. Evelyn stepping through her front door. Alone. She thought no one was watching. They never do. The cheap phone, not her regular phone, smaller, darker. She pulled it from her pants pocket as if it were ordinary. Typed fast, tucked it away, faster. I remembered thinking it was curious. Now I knew what it was. The math was not complicated. Evelyn sent a text. Linda received it. Linda read it. And whatever it said was enough to send her out her front door and into a neighbor's basement. And Greg killed her for it. Evelyn pulled the trigger. She just made Greg hold the gun. Something moved through my chest. Not warmth, not excitement. Quieter than that. More total. The sensation of a door swinging open onto a very large room. Power. Clean and absolute. Greg panicked, she said. He grabbed something from the workbench. A hammer. Heavy. She said it as if the weight mattered, as if the object's heaviness explained what he did with it. Blood, she said. Everywhere. Erin said she was scared. She grabbed the hammer to keep him back when he dropped to his knees beside Linda. Then she ran. She stopped talking. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and stared at the floor between her knees. I said nothing. My brain had already moved on. Get up, I said. My voice came out level, not unkind, just final. She looked up. Her eyes were red, the whites gone pink around the edges. She searched my face for something. Sympathy, probably. Rescue. The particular kind of comfort that asks nothing in return. She wouldn't find it. Get up, I said again. She got up. I moved through the dark kitchen without the flashlight. I knew the layout. The pantry door was off the kitchen, set into the far wall. I opened it, shelves, dry goods, a smell of cedar and something faintly floral. In here. She hesitated. Lock it from the inside. Stay silent. Don't open it for anyone. Not anyone. She stepped past me. Her shoulder grazed my arm. She was cold. Colder than the room. The lock clicked. I stood still. The kitchen settled around me. Dark, quiet. The hum of nothing where the refrigerator used to be. I thought about Evelyn, her dinner party, her cheap burner phone and her manicured fingers typing out the sentence that ended Linda Patterson's life. She didn't know I saw. She didn't know anyone saw. But I did. I held the beginning of it all. Evelyn thought she was the most powerful woman on this street. She was wrong. She just didn't know it yet. Chapter 12. I didn't linger. I moved back through the kitchen, through the dark hallway. My hand did not reach for the flashlight. I didn't need it. I knew this house. The stairs were straight ahead. 12 steps. I climbed them without counting, without slowing, without the careful, practiced silence I used on the way down. That version of me was finished. My footsteps landed full and deliberate on each riser. The way a man walks through a space he owns. Nothing down there could touch me now. The master bedroom door was where I left it. Open. The spotting scope still aimed at the window. Patient as a hunting dog, on point. I crossed the room and sat. Pressed my eye to the lens. The street resolved in an instant. The cul-de-sac spread out below me like a board game someone else thought they were playing. I swept the scope left. Evelyn's dining room window. The candlelight flickered inside. Guests sat around the mahogany table. Evelyn at the head, pouring wine, her smile perfectly fixed. the apex predator pretending she hadn't just slaughtered her neighbors. I pulled back from the scope. Slow. Unhurried. My phone was on the windowsill where I left it, and I picked it up and tapped the screen. 8:46 p.m. Exactly 46 minutes since the lights went out, and Evelyn still thought she was the one pulling the strings. I unlocked it and navigated to the photo roll. There was the image I'd captured. Now that I knew it was her, I could see the resemblance. Erin, captured through the scope 40 minutes ago in the gap between houses. The blood on her blouse showed dark. It was a remarkable photograph. Evelyn believed she was the architect tonight. She was only the fuse. I opened a new message. The cell towers were flat, but Valerie's battery-backed router was still alive. Faint signal. But text over Wi-Fi calling required almost nothing. I typed her real number into the field, the one I had memorized from the HOA directory. Attached the photograph of Erin's blood. I typed the caption. I know about the burner phone. I know your text caused this. Send David outside to check the security panel. Do it now, or I'll send him the picture. I hit send. 3 seconds. Delivered. I pressed my eye back to the scope. Down the street, Evelyn's dining room glowed in the dark. I watched the pale light of her phone on the table, a perfect rectangle, its edges marked by bleeding bright light. I watched her freeze. Good. I didn't want to just scare her. I wanted to move her. I wanted to pull the strings. Through the glass, I saw David turn to her. Words exchanged. The guests nodded. Moments later, she placed the phone on her lap. Evelyn stared at it for some time. Then she leaned toward David and spoke. David pushed his chair back, picked up his cell, and walked out the back door toward the side of the house. She had done it. She had obeyed me. A massive, intoxicating surge of power hit the back of my neck. I picked up the phone again and typed. Go to the front porch. Leave the phone on the table. Do it now. Send. I watched through the glass. 10 seconds later, Evelyn stood up, leaving her phone face down on the mahogany. She stepped out into the humid night air, standing alone on her dark porch. She was my puppet. I leaned back in the chair, ready to type the final instruction to bring her to Valerie's house. Then the street erupted. Not gradually, a full shout, and the heavy metallic screech of a garage door being forced open. I snapped forward, pressing my eye to the scope. The Pattersons' garage was wide open. Mark Evans had Greg pinned against the back of his Mercedes. In the spill of David's flashlight, I watched Mark raise a heavy iron wrench and bring it down on the trunk lock. Once, twice. The trunk lid tore open. A teenage girl was curled inside it, a zip tie around her wrists. She began to scream, pure, unfiltered terror that bounced off the house fronts. And then came the sirens, high and wavering from the main road. The police had arrived. The strobes hit the entrance of the cul-de-sac, red and blue light washing over the neighborhood in violent flashes. 2 cruisers slammed to a halt at the edge of the driveway. Officers spilled out, weapons drawn. Greg shoved Mark and lunged for the dark. The officers tackled Greg to the concrete before he made it 5 steps. Mark stood over them with the wrench. Through the scope, I saw a third officer move in fast, his sidearm drawn and aimed center mass at Mark. I watched Mark freeze. He raised his empty left hand, slowly opened his right, and let the heavy iron wrench drop to the asphalt. Mark sank to his knees, his hands in the air. Underneath the officers, Greg was thrashing on the ground, his face pressed to the pavement, screaming up at Mark. I couldn't hear the words through the glass, but the absolute desperation in his posture was obvious. He was breaking. I swept the scope back to Evelyn, and she was standing at the edge of the crime scene just outside the red and blue strobes. She stood there for a moment, processing the lighting, the shadows, and the chaos erupting around her. Whatever Greg was shouting from the pavement seemed to land on her like a physical weight. She didn't panic. She wasn't looking at the police. She turned slowly on the manicured grass. She looked past the cruisers, past her own home, directly down the dark street, toward my window. A cold spike of adrenaline hit the base of my spine. She didn't alert the officers standing 20 feet away. She didn't point. Evelyn stepped backward into the deep shadows at the edge of the property line, away from the distracted police, and vanished. Just like that. Swallowed completely by the dark. I let out a slow, ragged breath, a laugh caught in the back of my throat. She was running. The apex predator of Oak Ridge Court was finally running. I leaned forward and pressed my eye tight against the cold rubber of the spotting scope, eagerly sweeping the lens across the pitch-black lawns and dead driveways, hunting the dark to watch my puppet flee. Where was she going? The end. You've just listened to The Blackout, Book 3, The Stalker. Written by Ion Esimai, published by Separum Press, an Earreads production. Copyright 2026 by Ion Esimai, all rights reserved. You watched the night through Arthur's eyes. You saw what he saw. But Arthur only had half the story. The woman who started all of this? She's been at her dinner table the whole time playing host. She lit the match. Now she has to survive the fire. Book 4, The Hostess, available now. If you made it this far, you already know what kind of stories live here. Subscribe to this channel and tap the bell. Every time a new psychological thriller drops, you'll be the first one in the dark with it.